Hey everyone, welcome back to the Engineering Success Podcast. I'm Himanshu, and in today's episode, we have an exciting guest, Daniel, the head of engineering delivery at Velocity. Daniel has an incredible journey that takes him from QA roles to leading multiple high performing engineering teams across Australia and New Zealand. We'll dive deep into his leadership strategies, how he empowers teams, overcomes challenges, and fosters a culture of continuous improvement. So, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation with Daniel. Daniel, for the people who are watching this, I want you to give them uh, um, uh, your journey, like starting from straight out of college
Yeah.
to now. But what we're trying to look at here is that how after each transition, um, you felt more and more confident as a leader, or you recognized your own leadership qualities, and then what were some great learnings across this whole journey of almost a little over 2 decades for you?
Yeah. I know I'll start with school. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't Mr. Popular in the class by any means. I was just some other kid. Um, I kept myself to myself. I was quite private. So I wasn't like the captain of the school football team or anything like that. And looking back on me then, I'm quite surprised as to where I've become. I wouldn't have classed that kid as someone who would develop into a natural leader. And after school, college was the 20s were a difficult decade for me. I went to university. I didn't graduate, but I did have some really great experiences there. And as I said, the experiences I got there is not being the best in any team, but being the enabler in the team. That's where I found sort of my purpose. I can do this. I don't have to be number one to succeed. What I can do is help others to be number one, help the collective to be number one. And I really got a lot of purpose and fulfillment out of that. And through my 20s, I had a number of different jobs in retail, student accommodation, things like that, where I got to work in teams in different contexts. And I was always successful. And I identified that I'm more of a worker than a studier. I'm not so great at book learning. I learn through experience. I learn through conversation.
Most of this engineering roles,
Sorry?
most of this engineering roles, or you were doing something else?
No. So this was like working in a supermarket, working in student accommodation.
Okay.
I didn't get my first role in software and software engineering until I moved to New Zealand,
Okay.
where I was very fortunate to get a graduate role with a company called Adder. They took on 14 of us in the first batch. And I was going in there several years older than most of the other graduates who were fresh out of university, whereas I had graduated from the School of Life a little bit. I'd had a lot of part-time jobs. I'd had a couple of batches at college, university. So I came with a different experience to them, but I was very passionate about software, about technology, how technology worked. I was passionate about people and how teams worked and how team dynamics worked. And I was able to really succeed there. I spent nearly 3 years at Adderant, and even in the final week, I was still looking to make things better for the collective. So after I finished my sort of graduation 6 month period with the company, I got appointed to a team that were the critical response team. And the way software worked back then is we had one big delivery a year. It was mostly shipped on CDs to our clients who installed it on their servers. We weren't pushing up to the cloud every week, every day, like we do now. And so QA and manual QA particularly were very heavily relied on for the big regression push at the end of the year towards deployment date, release date. And I found that I got opportunities to organize those release testing and regression testing phases. I worked with the other QA to improve how we worked as a collective. And in my role in this team, this critical response team, we were actually responsible for supporting the last 10 versions of the software that were being used by different clients in different configurations. And a lot of the bugs that we were getting in and the high level support tickets we were being required to investigate required some really complex configurations with load balancers and servers and different versions of Windows and such. And I only had my own machine to do all this on. And I found that I was 2 or 3 times a day having to completely rebuild my machine from scratch just to test one bug or here and one bug there. And I was wasting a lot of my time doing this repetitive tasks. So I made a nuisance of myself. The IT team probably still curse my name to this day because I found out how to get little corners of different VMs that they had running on the server rack. And I set up one particular configuration here, and one configuration over here, and one configuration over there, so that I could just hop between VMs and test bugs and instances really quickly. And they were constantly playing whack-a-mole with me, kicking me off of one server. No, that server can't be used for this. You need to use that one, etc. And towards the end of my time there, it got to the attention of the VP for Asia Pacific. And even though he knew I was leaving, he brought me into his office with the IT team and said, "Okay, Daniel, let's sit down to decide what do you need? What does the team need in order to succeed?" And we designed a series of VMs that were load balanced on the different versions that were the main contenders for being supported. And they're still using that to this day. And I've spoken to QA who came into that role after me and talked to them about it and how much they use that system. Yes, that's one thing that I hold on to that gives me a lot of pride, that I was able to leave a place better than I found it. And that's how I approach almost every aspect of life, really, right? Trying to leave the situation better than you found it. So I moved on from Adderant to a much smaller company where it was what we would probably call a startup now, but they had been around for 15 years at that time. They had maybe less than a dozen engineers, and they had their own platform, which was used for supporting marketing, but they also did a lot of custom project work for various local businesses. And I was the first QA they'd ever hired. The person who had been doing the QA before was also the product manager and had been with the company since she was 13. She was the niece of one of the founders. As you often find in these small companies, there's this close-knit group of friends that started up with friends and family. And this was also my first experience working in 2-week sprints with a release at the end of every 2 weeks. And I could get my head around that quite quickly. Okay, it's just the same as what we were doing before, but smaller. And they'd never had a release that hadn't required a hot patch, right, within 2 or 3 days. So I made that my ambition. It's like, how can we increase the quality such that we don't have to do a hot patch 2-3 days after deployment? And what I did was I started sitting next to the engineers to test before they merged into master. And what I found I was able to do with this was magnify and multiply my effect, because I could sit with them, we'd test it together, and then I'd go and sit with another engineer. And over time, they learn, and they got little Daniel sitting on their shoulder almost. And what's Daniel going to ask me before I ask him over? And it changed how the team worked. We started doing unit testing and integration testing. We did proper deep investigations when there was an incident or an outage using, I didn't know the terms at the time, but we were effectively doing plainest postmortems. And it was while I was there that I started to get an understanding that there was a wider community of QA beyond me. And I came across a web publication called Testing Trapeze. And it was like an old school magazine just for QA, but it was just in a PDF form. And it came out, I think it was monthly or bi-monthly. And I started consuming this and getting a lot of ideas. And that was my first realization that there's a community outside of my 4 walls of an office talking about QA, talking about how to be better. And then I got an opportunity to work for PushPay. And I remember sitting in the interview for that job, and they told me that they deploy daily. And I'm like, what? How does that work? How can that possibly work? how can you deploy to production multiple times a day? It takes, how do you do regression testing, right? You can't possibly regression test your platform in less than a day. And so it was a huge learning experience for me of how, and the big takeaway from PushPay, one was the community engagement. I did the conferences, I did the podcast. I spent a lot of time learning and growing from outside, and then the value of the community. And the second thing was really around how the medium in which we deliver software allows us to change how we build software.
Okay.
So when we're shipping on CDs, it's very difficult for us to change something after the fact. So we have to be really careful that what we're putting on that CD works. When we're deploying fortnightly and it requires an outage of the platform, and even though we can deploy a hot fix the next day or 2 days later, it still requires another outage, we have to be really careful what we're deploying. Not to the same extent as the CD. We can be more reactive. But when you're deploying multiple times a day, very small changes, you don't have to have the same high threshold of testing the entire platform each time. You can test around the change. You can, and it means that when you're engineering, you can rely more on the unit test and automation that you're writing to support your one change. And if you have good observation and monitoring in the platform to tell you when something has gone wrong, you can react. We can use feature flags now. So we don't have to hold the same high quality bar in every little change that we make, because we have the ability to react. We have the ability to fix it. And this means we can be maybe more assertive with how we go forward, how we make changes. We don't need big, deep regression for testing phases for everything we do. If we have a good CI/CD pipeline, if we have good monitoring, observability, alerting, and the maturity of the team of how to operate in that way. So that was huge for me, my learning curve at PushPay. One thing I learned there that was not less, maybe a more of a negative point, was there can be in some organizations a cultural gap of us and them with engineers and other staff and other departments. And I had a very disheartening conversation with a manager of mine who I said, I want to get into leadership. I want to be an engineering manager. I want to lead teams of engineers, not just QA. And his response was, only engineers can lead engineers. Right. And that was a real blow to me at the time. And since then, I've seen so many fantastic, brilliant leaders that have come into engineering leadership who haven't been engineers, who haven't written code. Right. And they're an inspiration to me, but also I hope to be an inspiration to others, that you can be a successful engineering manager without having been an engineer. It's,
Can
I
we
think it's,
can we do a deeper dive on this whole notion? Said that
yeah,
meaning engineer can lead an engineer, but you yourself and now in your experience, you saw people with not engineering background being able to take leadership positions and doing exceptionally well. What do you think is the reason behind that? How, or I'm trying to frame this better, but why was this apprehension in the first place, or resistance to this whole notion of outsider or a QA leading engineering team of the first place? No. What changed? Any better, or is it different? Trying to build some perspective on the background here.
I think a misconception comes from command and control leadership structures, where, so if you look at the military, they very much used to be and an expectation, particularly in naval. And I'll talk about David Marquette and his brilliant book probably as part of this. But traditional naval leadership is the captain knows everything.
Yes.
They know every knob, dial, switch. They've worked their way up from a low rank, and they know exactly how the machine works, and they can give precise instructions on how to do everything. And I think that same misconception of only engineers can lead engineers comes from that same kind of thinking where to be able to teach engineers, to be able to manage engineers, you need to be able to do their job better than they can. But when you're a leader, when you're a manager, you're not doing that job anymore. And this is one of the reasons I love David Marquette's book, Turn the Ship Around. If you haven't read it, I'd really highly recommend it. It's one of my top books. The basic TLDR here is he rose to the rank of captain in the US Navy, and he was given 2 years to study this great big huge book of instructions on how his next command worked. And he went through and he learned every little bit of it. And then at the last moment, they said, actually, you're going to be taking over this submarine over here. It's completely different. And he walked onto that ship and he tried to give orders, and it didn't work because the various settings and controls and knobs and dials weren't exactly the same. So he had to sit down with his teams. Okay, how are we going to actually make this work? And he turned the whole equation around. As the captain, as the leader, he gave intent. What is the outcome we need to achieve? And the people sitting at the controls, the people in charge of the various departments in the ship, they knew how to do their bit of it best. And so they could come back to him with a plan. We need to sail to this island. Okay, to get to this island, we should take this course. We'll avoid that reef. And they would come back with the plan to him. And he'd go, yeah, let's go. He was accountable to the outcomes, to his higher ups. But those that knew best how to do the job were doing the job, making the decisions. And software moves such a pace right now that if you're an engineering manager with 2 or 3 years experience, you're out of date. Right? You haven't touched code for 2 or 3 years, you're out of date.
Yeah.
And therefore you're not the expert on the tools anymore. And I think that's why the new style of leadership that's starting to come through, that you're starting to see people who are better at leadership succeeding as opposed to who was the best engineer, because technology is moving at such a pace right now. We need people who can enable the result, who can enable getting the best outcome over someone who knows how to write the best code.
So you think if we look at it to enable best outcomes, we're actually enabling people, right from the example like you gave.
Yeah.
People who were good at to do they are taking the situation from them, inputs from them, and you being a leader, not imposing your thought or your decisions on them rather than, but you're getting it from people who know best and then implementing it. Well, but I think revolves about people skills on us.
Absolutely.
And how we talk about the attribute of be good with people, would you attribute to your career prior to the engineering? Well, when the whole engineering happened in your life, like those early days of working with student accommodation and other things. How would they or contribute from?
Yeah. Ironically, one of the people I consider the worst managers I ever had was probably really one of the most fundamental early inspirations I had and teachers I had conversed me in the importance of looking after the team, looking after people into a safe environment. So this is going a long way back. I was working in retail, and there was a member of the management team that looked after the large collection of shops, and they had particularly nasty habit of hiring their friends into shops to act as spies. They would stand outside the shop, phone you up, and then walk into the shop and tell you, why aren't you on the shop floor? just to assert power and to assert control and keep you on edge. And what the lesson I took from that was actually seeing how the team that I worked with in the shop, I was assistant manager at the time, and how the team in the shop reacted to these situations and how they reacted to me. And I remember there was one case where we had a senior member of a very high up management in this particular company doing a random tour of our county. And there was a possibility that they might walk into a store. And this manager phoned me up and said, I need to cancel all leave, get everybody in to make the shop look tip top just in case this guy comes by. And I refused. No, there are people on my team that have booked their holiday. One of them's got her daughter in from town. One of them's gone out to see their niece or nephew. They've got good reason. They've booked their leave. They've followed the process. I'm not going to cancel that to give somebody a false impression of the reality. And it taught me the importance of being able to protect your team. And in response, what I got from my team was a lot of a little bit of extra effort, a little bit like an extra people staying an extra 5-10 minutes just to finish the job they were doing and not leave it in a half-hearted state for someone else. And because we had this external threat, we actually banded together and bonded and became safer together because we protected each other. That gave me a very strong sense of moral right and looking after the team and safety within the team, and gave me a lot of confidence to say no to authority and not just bow down and say yes sir, no sir. And it really showed me the impact. Like, we're all human, right? It doesn't matter what job we do. We're all human. We're all trying to get along and work together and do the best we can. Very few people are coming into work to do a bad job. Whatever your job is, very few people are coming in to do a bad job. And you protect people and they will do the best.
That's such a powerful statement here. Just take care. So in one of the episodes, I was with an engineering lead, and she said that if you just take care of your engineers beyond the 5 days when they're with you, that is, don't call them unnecessarily on a weekend if it's not needed. If something can wait, just leave. She said that if you just take care of them for the for 2 days when they're not working, they'll be there for you for the next 5 days when you need them. That meant I come from a background of working with early stage startups where we didn't have the concept of holidays or what is a Saturday, Sunday, day, night. We just didn't know. We were constantly pushing, we were working often. For me, it took me some time to really sit and realize that if while this may look like your path to success, maybe you're able to build something right now, but eventually going to crash because the system is overhauled. This model is not sustainable. Now, it's only to a moment that you can push boundaries. With that being said, it's not about how you don't work on weekends for this meeting, but what is urgent versus what is important. It's a skill to figure it out, and that's something I think we build over time. But in a lot of startups, as I was saying earlier in this conversation, that most of us are not coming from that background. These things put theory from, and you'll keep somebody straight out of college, got needs and fundings, and now this person is building his own SaaS or tool, whatever he's building, and he's got a team. Now you don't know what does it actually mean to take care of the team. Because in case the quick is the busy, and you just want to, your whole focus there, and sometimes it comes at the cost of the well-being of us.
And most people who work in a very early stage startups, they've got a passion for that, right? They're very passionate about building something new, getting it working, getting it going, and they're quite willing to put a lot of that extra effort. And it's something I've looked at in the past and thought about. I've had ideas, I might try and build this or build that. But I've come to the realization that where I am in my life with a young family, I can't put in the level of hours that we would need to succeed, because you have to put in a lot of yourself, a lot of your soul. When you have young children, you need to have better balance, especially. And a lot of people, they will burn out working like that, even if they don't have these other responsibilities in their life, because the brain is a muscle like any other. If you go to the gym and you don't leave the gym for 3 days straight, you're going to be crawling out crippled with injuries, right? The brain is, right? We don't think of it as a muscle because we can't flex it and see it and look at it in the mirror or measure it or lift weight with it. But it is a muscle and it needs rest, it needs relaxation, it needs recovery. And something that's taken for granted in your youth is your body. I'm sure you've done the same, that you've pushed it too far, you've done too many late nights, etc. But you'll feel as you're getting older, that becomes harder. You've got to have better balance. And the brain is just the same. And for early level startups, it does take a lot of energy. It does take a lot of passion and commitment. And looking after those that are looking after your product, your platform, your technology is the most important thing a leader needs to do. And to look after them, you need to not just make sure they've got a comfy chair and comfy desk, etc. It's being there for them as humans, making sure they are getting the rest they need, watching for the signs of burnout. Have they got trouble at home? Do they need a little bit of extra sort of space, if you like? Because if you want people to bring their whole selves to work, you need to be accepting and willing to support the whole self that counts.
Why don't you I think we touched on your experience on leading teams. I think in a previous store at Velocity, they're managing multiple teams. So what changes when you're a manager or when you become manager of managers, when you lead people? What changes?
Yeah. So it's been a huge learning curve for me. You're leading through proxy now, right? When you're leading, you're trying to lead through others. Instead of me sitting with my team for being part of the planning session every week, being part of the retros every week and the stand-ups, and being able to very tangibly guide the journey the team are taking through those ceremonies, I now have to coach others to be able to do that, to be able to guide their teams through ceremonies. It's the way I often look at it is I try to reflect on what I was like when I first started looking after a single team. And I had some fantastic coaches. There's 3 or 4 of them. And what advice they gave me, how they gave it to me, how they supported my growth as a leader. And then I'm trying to replay those experiences to my report, who are looking after these teams. And I'll look to spend a lot of time with them where I can. It's really important for me to still talk as often as I can with people, just casually getting to know them as people, making sure they're supported as people and individuals. And again, it comes back to this notion that everyone is coming to work to do the best they can. And if something is not working, it's probably because there's a knowledge gap or an information gap. Right?
Is that so? That this whole assumption that everybody's trying to do their best. We mentioned it would be a knowledge gap or skill gap. Do you not see an intent gap would also be there within some times?
So engagement and passion for the job that's in front of them can definitely be a gap, right? But nobody is coming to work deliberately to do bad work. They might not be coming with the passion with their whole selves that enables them to do their best work. And that is one of the hardest things of leadership is bridging that gap if it occurs. There's a book called Belonging. I believe the author's from New Zealand. And in the book, he talks around generating a sense of belonging. And he's coached with the various New Zealand rugby teams. I believe he's coached with the England football team. where he's coached the South African cricket team, at various businesses, and what he sits down with the team is try and understand, why are you here as an individual? Why are you here? And how does that connect to the team's journey? Because when you find that connection and you find your sense of belonging in a team, and you can tie that to a sense of purpose, then the team, then that helps to unlock that little extra bit, that extra 5-10% that will help you to go the extra mile, to engage a little bit more in the conversation. And that engagement can be huge, right? It can make such a difference. I had one member of the team who, when we went into COVID and we all went into lockdown, they would join the stand-ups, but they would just sit there silently. And they would just sit in the back, they'd say their piece, and that's it. And I could tell that their work quality was dropping off. I just had a conversation with them. Okay, what's happening is that they weren't feeling the connection to the team because we weren't in the office sitting together every day. We weren't laughing. We weren't going to lunch together. She wasn't getting the same energy. And so I started introducing a little bit of games to the end of our stand-ups, right? Stand-ups, something, yeah. So going to tangent a little bit, if you don't mind. So stand-ups were designed in a time when everybody came into the office. And the idea was to align and plan your day. And they morphed over time into this miniature phrase update where I say my piece, and I'm sure you've found it. People just done it myself, where you disengage from what everyone else is saying. So it's defeating the purpose. You're not getting the alignment. You're not getting the planning that you need at the end of the day. And when we went into lockdown and we started being a lot more remote, there are other aspects of the stand-up that were invisible. And what they were was, before stand-up, if you think back to time in the office before COVID, is people would, in that 5-10 minutes before stand-up, they would talk about their weekend. They would talk about what they did last night, the TV show. You can 5-10 minutes to kill. It's just shoot that. And they would connect as people. And then after the stand-up, what you might do is just tap someone on the shoulder and, hey, I'm stuck with this. Can you help me out for a bit? And those two things disappeared entirely when we went remote. So I changed up how my stand-ups worked. And we started with a little quiz. We've got a local newspaper quiz online here. We used to do that. We've done things like Wordle and other little internet games. It takes 5-10 minutes. And we just did that as a warm-up at the start of the stand-up. Didn't have to wait for people to join the call. We just get into it. Whoever's first in the call starts. And it's a good way to kill that first couple of minutes where people are still dialing in, but also get some human connection going on. Then we did the main stand-up part, but instead of it being focused on an individual, I turned it to being focused on, what is the team's outcome? What are we trying to achieve? And everyone contributed their part of the puzzle to it. And then we finished where it is. We had half an hour of calendar blocked out, so that we couldn't be disturbed. I was just any other business. Have you got something cool that you've just learned that you want to show to the team? Do you have a couple of questions that you want to ask and dig a bit deeper in? Do you want to do some pair programming on something? And it was just that space for that tap on the shoulder kind of time that we could do as a team. And it worked really well. And it really changed that individual's engagement. They became a lot more focused and motivated and participating in the team once again. But it also helped us as a team better achieve our outcomes, because we had that greater alignment and sense of purpose and direction, which is so difficult to achieve, and even more difficult as we've become more remote.
When you implemented this practice initially, was there if not resistance, but did people take their own time to open up digitally over calls versus to?
So not so much. But I think it's because we had been a quite close team before lockdown,
Yeah.
right? Before we went into lockdown. So having more time together was a thing that we were quite keen on. I have found trying to encourage this in teams that have only ever been remote or are mostly remote or newly formed a little bit more difficult. And there's a couple of workshops and things I do to help teams to form and to bond and to get to know each other and develop some of that sense of belonging to each other. And I think you have to be quite deliberate about these. And these are some of the skills that I think when you talk about people not being trained in leadership, these are the kind of skills that people should need to be trained in. These are the gaps, the knowledge gaps that we have in a lot of our leaders. They don't. No one's ever taught how to bring a team together. No one's ever taught how to get engagement back from somebody who's become disengaged. Old school business doesn't have a lot of patience for people who have become disengaged. And 30 or 40 years ago, we were just, okay, gone, bye, you're disengaged, off you go. Right. And some people, it's fair to say some people are not on board, right? They're not on board with the way you're going and the direction of the company going and the way you want to work. In which case, it's better for all parties for them to find the place they want to work, whether it does work in their style. It's better for them and it's better for the team they're leaving behind because it just damages the morale and the engagement of others. And sometimes it's better for someone to move on when there's not the growth opportunity they need either, right? And I've always had this mentality, and I was introduced to it when I first started I got some early leadership training while I was at PushPay, where we were taught the concept of the alliance, where the employee isn't there just to do a job and go home and just get money for it. And the employer's role is not to extract every bit of value out of an employee and then send them home. It's this alliance where it's more like a tour of duty, where you're here to do your best. While you're here, I'm going to give you the skills that will help you in your journey further down the road. And I've found this especially important in communities like New Zealand, where it is very tight, it is very close knit, because almost everybody you look at in New Zealand who's worked in New Zealand for 10 years have worked at one, got to cross paths with someone else. There's 4 or 5 big companies here that everyone has almost certainly worked at one of them at least once. And so a lot of people know each other. And having that good employer brand, employee brand is really important. If you've developed a relationship with someone who's burns bridges, you're going to find it difficult to get roles because that kind of gets around. And the same as with companies. If you're a company that's got a reputation for burning people, that gets around. People find out, right? But the inverse is true. If you've got a reputation as a company that grows people, that develops talent, then you keep attracting better talent. And this plays into a lot of the recent movements like diversity. If you have good diversity, you can support and attract people from diverse backgrounds and make them feel safe, make them feel comfortable. And then the whole team is richer for it. The company is richer for it. You achieve better outcomes.
I think very often in this podcast or during a course of conversation, we are touching the aspect of having a passion for people, the well-being, and almost everything else that we spoke about is revolving around that to just take care of them. Uh,
Yeah.
and he also spoke about something which, so in my experience of last 6 months of doing this podcast, you spoke about that sometimes you don't have to uphold strict parameters towards quality because your ability to react now is you can react faster, better through all the and insights and metrics. Now with all these same lines, what are those metrics or signals? Now I want to move to a more technical part of the discussion for us. Then, what could be those signals or metrics which you would rely on to know if a certain team or you as leader of leaders, manager of managers, would know that this aspect of your maybe engineering is not working fine? Or is there any specific set of data or metrics that you look at on a regular basis? And then what do you make out there?
So yeah, metrics on engineering have always been really difficult. You think back to the 90s, people would get their performance review on how many lines of code they wrote and things like that. And that was really damaging because lines of code don't mean quality code, right? It's like measuring an author by the number of pages in his book, right? Some of the best books are paper thin, right? Really, you want to be measuring on, are the outcomes being achieved? And so it becomes very important to have sort of North Star metrics, KPIs around what the product is trying to achieve. And can the team achieve that? In being, sorry, let me regather my thoughts.
Take an example, maybe like a team who has this product X and what they should be doing. Like,
Yeah, one of the best examples I saw of this firsthand was a team adjacent to me in a company where there was concern about the number of people that were dropping off in the password reset process. People were trying to reset, they were coming into the platform to engage with things, hitting this blocker, starting the password reset process and dropping off. And that showed a real engagement problem with the platform, because if they're not in the platform, if they're not logged in, then they're not making transactions, which is how the company lives, right? We need those transactions in order to succeed. It generates revenue. And the team that was tasked with the problem would look at not just what is the process, but how long does the process take to reset your password? And they drove to reduce that and make it as simple and easy as possible. And I remember there being two key metrics they were looking at. Number one was the password drop-off rate, and number two was the time it took. And they run a series of small experiments with feature flags and throwing out A/B tests of different flows to people. They were able to quite quickly determine what was the best approach to take to productionize. And then they wrapped that process around with all the various secure processes that were required to make it production reliable and maintainable going forward. And it was really such a brilliant demonstration to me of agile problem solving, which is what we need our teams to do, right? When we talk about agile, it's become, I see so many videos and blogs and podcasts about agile is dead and agile is awful. And it's, when I look at those, it tends to be the same people trying to follow agile rigidly and have a playbook and a rules set. Agile is about agility, the agility of the team, the agility to respond to inputs. And a big part of that is what inputs are you getting and having the right inputs. So being able to, from the start, set, this is the outcome we want to achieve. We want to achieve an outcome where we increase the return rate of people that are doing the password reset policy. Okay, now we've got this broad, expansive options we can pursue to get that. Let's do some experiments. Let's try some things. See what works, see what doesn't work, and pick the best. That's what agility is. That's what agile mindset is, and agile problem solving, and giving teams the space and the freedom to do that. Now, there was...
Can you think?
So there's a TED talk that I watched years ago that I wish I could find again. Really left a huge mark on me, in where there was a study done, I believe it was in America, where they took the top professors of various universities and they set them a challenge. They took the same challenge, they gave it to first year graduate, small teams of people. And it was very small numbers of the top professors that actually got the right result. whereas the vast majority of the teams were able to achieve and solve the problem. And it showed that a single individual can't, as brilliant as they might be, isn't better than the sum of the parts of a team, even of less qualified, less storied, less experienced people. So if we can give a team a problem to solve, and the way where this translates in engineering is not having or not necessarily relying heavily on the experience and expertise of one architect or one product manager to say, this is what you need to build. Instead, the product manager and the architect want to be guiding the team. This is the outcome we're trying to achieve. This is the knowledge that I have in this area, but let's as a team explore it. Let's as a team do an innovation on this. Take 2 or 3 days to explore opportunities and options, do some proofs of concept, do some tests, and measure the outcomes. And the measurement is really key to it, the scientific theory of proving what works and what doesn't. But it's pairing that with enabled agile teams.
Well, essentially, we are looking at taking a business metric or a business outcome and then tracing it back to the engineering of it and giving that as the goal for the team, not maybe looking at engineering metrics directly. Am I right?
Yeah. So that's one key aspect that I look at for sure. I've used various tools that analyze engineers' behaviors, but in isolation, it's without the context of how the team are behaving and reacting, they can be very misleading. If you're looking at like the number of commits that come out of a team or the number of lines of code and things like that, you have to be really careful if you're looking at that kind of metric, because for me, the key is to pick metrics where if someone games the metric, you get a winning result, a winning outcome. So things like number of PRs can work in that way, because what we know is smaller PRs are easier to review. They are less dangerous. They're more targeted, and we work in better ways and get better outcomes from smaller slices of work. Counting something like number of PRs can be good, but you have to be cautious and conscious of bad behaviors could gain from that. Does that person mean that they're writing a whole bunch of PRs, but they're not reviewing others? Or they're all in the wrong area. They're just doing like very small things that don't actually contribute to a larger outcome.
Yeah.
So metrics can be a double-edged sword. You need a lot of context around them, and for me, the best uses of metrics I've seen are when they are shared and discussed within the team. Using metrics to manage a team is where you tend to get the negative behaviors. But if you give the metrics to the team and say, use this information in your retros, in your planning sessions to enable yourself to be better, that's when the team will take that information and supercharge itself. I suppose an analogy here, the explosion of metrics we're getting in sport. If you look at, I don't know if you follow football, but it's full of expected goals for, expected goals against, expected chances per game. All of that in context and out of context can be quite meaningless. But you give that information to the team and say, how can we get more valuable goals or goal scoring opportunities rather than just chances? Then empowers the team. It gives them the visibility of their progress.
Yeah. So it's on first layer, it's the metrics. And then there is the context to it, the interpretation to it. One without the other wouldn't give you the right visibility.
Absolutely. You need to pair the two together and have, and again, it comes back to experiments. If you're seeing a metric in your team, so you are measuring number of PRs that they publish every week, going to the team and saying, okay, we're going to run an experiment as a team to try and increase the number of PRs we're doing. We're going to do X. and then looking at that at the end of the week or the end of the month, saying, did we achieve it? Did it have the desired effect? Did it have some unintended consequences along the way? And taking that scientific theory mindset to metrics and how you use metrics is really critical.
Daniel, I want to ask about the struggles or the challenges that you personally faced in your leadership journey. And what is it that keeps you, for lack of a better word or lack of a better slang, I would say, what keeps you up at night when you think about your work? While I do see that you talk with a certain passion when it comes to the well-being of team, but there would be times where usually there are times when you set a certain goal, there's a certain timeline to it, but you know that we're not going to meet this deadline. Or there could be several other scenarios as well, which are a concern for an engineering team. So, what are those concerns? What are those challenges you personally have faced?
So I guess what keeps me up at night most is thinking of how I can support the continued growth of the team and the continued sort of maturity journey. One thing that's not talked about widely in engineering leadership talks is the team's maturity. A team that has just come together that may have some very experienced individuals probably needs a very secure, very regulated process, right? Not because red tape is good, right? Red tape slows us down, but when it's used effectively, it acts like fence posts on the side of a cliff. It helps keep you from falling down or falling off the rails. It sets expectations, it sets standards. And having quite formal process can be an effective tool of helping to establish behaviors. And as the team gets more mature, you can remove those. And what I spend a lot of time thinking about, what I spend a lot of time of my time mulling over is where are the various teams on that maturity journey? And how can I support the collective growth of all of these teams? Because if I implement a policy or a process that helps the one team, it might hold another team back because then they may be further along that maturity journey. But if I'm too liberal with the freedom, with the expectations and how a team should work, then that lack of guidance can lead to a team feeling lost and uncertain where they're at, right, and how to proceed. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how to support teams in their various journeys, where are certain teams at. I spend quite a lot of time thinking about sort of how to level up the leaders within the organization. And one thing I always want is more accountability, how to enable people to be accountable without having to use the stick, as you were, right? When you try and force people into being accountable through punitive measures, then or reprimanding them, that's when red tape becomes and process becomes something that people rail against, that they rebel against. It's supporting it with the appropriate narrative that enables them to get better and they know why it's there, they understand why it's there, and that they take accountability of themselves of taking that journey. I think, yeah, that's where I spend a lot of my time thinking.
Quick time check, Daniel. I requested real about is it okay if I just take 10 more minutes with real? The conversation has been so amazing, guys. Still have one aspect on the power.
Of course, sorry, I tend to ramble on.
No, that's it, man. Even I lost track of time. I just looked at the watch and I realized, oh, we spent so much time. Daniel, what is it that enables you so you spoke about things that keep you up at night, about how do you create that environment? How do you make it possible for your team leaders and your team so that they are at their best. And what enables you in doing that is that, again, I'm trying to think of a word, but what is it that you had which would make it easier for you to do to take care of your team?
Yeah. Feedback. I was once had a very wise coach, and he taught me the value of feedback. And we coined this phrase together: feedback is a gift. Please give generously. I just love that phrase on so many levels because it doesn't just mean give lots of free feedback. It also means give it in a way that is generous to the human who's receiving it. Think about the person who's receiving it and where are they at when you're giving it. And for me, I don't know how each member of the team. I'm not the specialist in each aspect of their job, right? I could never be that kind of leader. So I have to lead through empowerment, and I have to lead through collaboration, community, and I can only do that. And I can only guide people if I get feedback from them as to where I'm going wrong, where they need support, what's working for them, what's not working for them, what works in their condition, what doesn't, where they struggle as a team. But equally from my superiors, I get incredible feedback from my leaders. And I'm very blessed with that. And I've had some really fantastic leaders throughout my career that have been very good at giving me feedback to help me grow. And without that, I can't grow. I can't support others to grow, and they can't grow themselves. We're in a state in our industry at the moment where change is coming at a rate we've never seen before. It keeps getting faster and faster with AI and everything that's coming through. It gives us huge superpowers to do some incredible things that we can use to change the world for the better. But we can't do that on our own. We can't do it individually. We need a team to achieve those outcomes, to a team that can specialize, and through feedback from our customers, from each other, we get that acknowledgement and guidance as to whether we're on the right path or whether we need to course correct.
I think when it comes to feedback, I've had somebody in my life who told me something around the same line. And also, one more thing that he added was that when you're receiving feedback, you just have to take it. Because when the other person is saying it, in your mind, you might want to refute it. You might want to say no to it. But that is the perception that you gave out to the other person. When that you receive it well, while giving feedback is important, but how well do you receive it is equally important in that equation. And I think that's where when you say that giving feedback is a gift comes in, that you may not have to necessarily sugarcoat it, but you have to figure out a language that is cohesive for both the people there who understand, they take it, because in a workplace, essentially both of you are on the same team. You're fighting for the same goal. So once you realize that, it's important how you give it, how you take it as well.
Absolutely. Right. We've all had unwanted gifts in our life where granny has given you yet another pair of socks or that are not in your color. But you're not rude to granny and say, oh God, no, that's horrible. You say, oh, thanks, gran. And you take it away and you appreciate the sentiment that it's been given in, right? The love that it's been given with. And feedback's much the same way. Maybe you don't appreciate that pair of socks, that piece of feedback in that moment, but take it away graciously. And I always encourage people and coach people, and you're not agreeing with it straight away. Give it 24 hours, sleep on it, and see how you feel after 24 hours. And if you still don't agree with it, go back to the person that gave you the feedback and say, hey, can we talk about this some more? I feel like I'm missing some context, because the chances are that they've missed a bit of context or how it's affected them, or a bit of information, or maybe they're missing information from your side as to why you made that decision or took that action. But give yourself that time to process it, because, and this is important both for the giver and the receiver. When you're giving feedback, in the 5, 10, 15 minutes before you do it, you've been thinking about it. They've been thinking about something completely different. You put a handbrake on their train of thought to give them this feedback. They're not necessarily prepared for it, or you may not be prepared for it when you're receiving it. So give yourself the time to consume it, really, truly consume it before you react if it's not something you agree with. And don't not react either. If you disagree, have a dialogue, have a conversation. Don't just ignore it.
Daniel, I must say for me, this has been a very refreshing podcast because most of the conversations end up being too technical, which is not wrong. There is a technical side to engineering. It is technical, of course, but the human aspect of it is equally important. And that's what I felt that in our course of conversation, we were touching down upon again and again. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time once again. Maybe just this question more. What so for you, apart from the work, what else is there in anything? Do you have any hobbies or how do you relax? What are the other things
Yeah.
like?
I have a beautiful family that I love spending time with. I try to structure my day in such a way that I can be at home for a good few hours before the kids go to bed to spend some time with them, do activities with them. Beyond that, for myself, I play football for prep and yeah, still playing. At the age of 40, got an awesome team that I play with. There's actually 13 people in my team that are over 60 years old and they're still playing every week. And it's just great to be around these old guys with their energy and their experience and their passion and just to, yeah, be in a different context, not have to be the manager, not have to be the leader and just do my thing and with some really great characters. So yeah, they're the two main things that I take up my time.
And have you been a fan of football throughout since your school and college days? Or is it something more?
I grew up in England. So since I could walk, I was kicking a ball.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I moved to Sheffield, which I consider my home, that's where I got my sense of self.
Yeah.
And while I was living there, I always lived within earshot of Bramall Lane. So even if I couldn't go to the game, I could hear the game. And you may know that Sheffield is the home of football. They've got the oldest football club in the world. So football runs thick through the blood of everyone from Sheffield. And it's just infectious, the passion for it and the camaraderie and the togetherness and there's some ugly aspects to football, but there's also a lot of great aspects to it too.
Daniel, thank you so much. I think a lot of valuable lessons and key takeaways from this conversation. How do you look at feedback? How do you take care of your team? Look at quality. A lot of it. I do hope that we make this a regular thing. I would want to sit with you maybe sometimes again in the next few weeks. And there's a lot that is left undiscovered, like couldn't touch down upon on this call. But we must definitely do it again sometimes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Himanshu. It's been really beautiful speaking with you, and we've touched on a lot. But there is so much, there is so much to engineering and engineering leadership. I'm sure you could do a lifetime of podcast and still have a lifetime more to spare.
Yeah. So thank Darren, with this we come to an end for everybody who's been watching, who has been with us to this podcast. This is Daniel, and we leave the links to the books he recommended. Daniel, please tell me if I'm missing anything. One was Turn the Ship Around, and the other is Belonging.
Belonging, yeah, yeah, belonging. I will get you the direct link. So they're two of my favorite books. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Stay tuned for more.